I'm going to make another nightgown today. If you're new here, I'm on a journey of creating a whole wardrobe from scratch. You're very welcome to sew along. As usual, there are free pattern drafting instructions for you to make it for your own measurements and your own preferences. I already made 2 versions, 2 interpretations to show you what can be done with this pattern, and this one is going to have some lace inlaying and a slightly different skirt. I'd like to make it a birthday gift for my mummy. I'm running a bit late, however I already have the box. I cut the bodice pieces as usual and stay stitched the décolleté lines. The bodice pieces are connected with a French seam to each other. Just so that you know what's coming, I'm going to work with the same method here as on this slip dress I made. The upper edge will be finished with a bias tape that goes around to become a strap and will be hidden in the back underneath the lace. So no seam allowance needed here. I got very lucky. On eBay I got some authentic Calais Caudry lever's lace. So let's break this down real quick. Traditionally, lace had been done by hand for a very long time, a very tedious, intense labor. John Heathcote, an English inventor, studied the hand movements of a Northamptonshire manual lace maker and reproduced them to create the old Loughborough machine that was able to create machine-made to what we call a bobbinet. The yarns, they are essentially twisted into a hexagonal structure. And oh, I love this print. It's like, look honey, me and the dog, we just made a machine that makes this net, and it's revolutionary. Anyway, we love bobbinet. It is still being used in lingerie, embroidery, haute couture, has very practical properties, many purposes, and is the derivative for lever's loom, so that's where that name comes from. John Levers, another English engineer, he improved the bobbinet machines in that they were able to make intervals in the plain bobbinet net, and the A was added for the French to be able to pronounce it easier, because these looms, they were brought from Nottingham to the coastal town of Calais and later Caudry. That region in France and Belgium were already very famous, had a very strong heritage when it comes to lace making. So it's a kind of champagne versus sparkling wine situation when it comes to that name. These looms were further improved by the jacquard system, which was invented by the French weaver and merchant Joseph-Marie Jacquard. He essentially developed a sort of mechanism with punched cards that are laced together into a continuous sequence to weave gorgeous and complicated patterns into the textiles. Which is, by the way, also being considered a very important milestone in the history of computing hardware. This technology inspired computer engineers, but they were also able to adopt it for the lever's looms, making it almost indistinguishable from handmade lace. Now, I already talked about it, but during the war many of these looms and their frames were broken up for iron. The boom of synthetic fibers also favored Rachel lace, made on Rachel machines that essentially knit the lace. But Calais and Caudry still stand as the place for high quality laces that are being used by haute couture houses, by the luxury fashion segment. I'm pretty sure it's even trademarked. Luckily, places that value this heritage, these techniques still exist. And they're still using cotton and silk for their laces, which you're not really able to use synthetic stretchy materials on these looms anyway. And depending on the yarns that you're using, it can look quite different. Silk fibers, for example, can be made almost invisible against the skin, like a shadow. This lace is a bit heavier, perfect for a nightgown I find, made out of cotton for the most part and a bit of nylon. And of course these are very pricey in comparison to knitted Rachel lace that is made out of polyester. On the website it says that it's only supposed to be dry cleaned, which for a nightgown is a bit silly of course, so I have pre-washed it as a test first. It was fine, and because it's cotton and a bit of nylon, I think it will be fine as long as it's treated gently and not being thrown into the washing machine with some other garment that has metal zippers in it or something. But definitely pre-wash your ingredients if you want to be able to wash your garment once it's finished. I am now trying to figure out how to inlay the lace in the front. I examine the areas that are interesting, where the line can continue in an interesting way, what will look best when it's overlapped, what areas to keep. I think the peak here in the middle, I will cut it back and follow the rows here so that it's not too busy. And this peak here I will keep as an applique. I based it in place, of course, just so that it's easier on the machine. And to make sure that nothing is stretched out, that the overlapping pieces are really symmetrical, I double check by placing them next to each other like that. I can now follow the line that I have decided upon for where the lace is going to be appliqued, and another line where the fabric will be cut back. This process is rather slow, of course. It took about 20 minutes. I'm using a tiny zigzag stitch, and as you can see, I constantly keep my needle down to rotate the piece to follow all those tiny petals and lines. I will now take out the basting stitch. Here hopefully you can see the two lines. I can cut back the lace close to the zigzag stitch. And now I can cut back the fabric too. As usual, you don't have to worry about the edges fraying, they'll be fine. Be careful not to cut into your net accidentally. You might also want to use small scissors that are blunt at the tip, not quite sure what those are called, but I'm basically just lifting and cutting. It's very satisfying actually. And these are the basics of inlaying lace at home. It's not too complicated or fiddly, it's just tedious for the most part. I feel like this would work so well for a bralette of sorts too. So I cut two strips on bias in a 45-degree angle to the grain line. Because they are on bias, we can mold them into the round shape here. This thing is helpful for pressing folds into the bias tape. You just push it through there and press, and with cotton it's all a bit less slinky and fiddly and way quicker than with silk, of course. And now we have these folds to guide us and to fold it over the edge. I will place it onto the wrong side of my bodice, securing it from the strap peak in the back up to the lace peak in the front. Also make sure that these seams here are well pressed and toward the same side on left and right. I pressed mine toward the front. Placing it upside down sort of, and I will stitch right into the fold that is 8 mm roughly. And because it's cotton, I even felt brave enough and had not basted it in advance and went freehand this time. Now we can turn to the right side and fold the bias tape so that it sits slightly lower than the initial seam. Usually with bias tape you would do it the other way around, so from the wrong side, so that you wouldn't even see any stitching. But here it makes more sense that way because we will continue to stitch this tape together to create a strap. Once I'm over the lace of the bodice, I just continuously fold it together and stitch very close to the edge. On the inside it turned a bit weird here. Maybe I should have pasted it in place, but it's actually quite neat on the outside. As for the length of the strap, I'm not quite sure yet. I'd like to fit it on the person, on the body, so I'll just leave it for now, but I will add a bias tape to the other side too now. This one turned out a bit better. For the back, I'd like to make the lace follow this curve here. This edge can hide the end of the strap and the tape as well, and this rose can be at center back, and these pieces I can cut them back. So I'll just cut them open. The wrong side of the lace is facing me. I'd like to connect them where the lace is not too wide so that it allows a bit of movement. So I'll pin these pieces onto each other and connect them together with an arrow zigzag stitch. A bit hard to see, it also started raining. In German there is a saying, April, April, der macht was er will. Okay, but here you can see these are narrow connecting points. So I will now pull it apart and set another zigzag stitch onto the seam. This is what it looks like, and the ends can be cut back. I can now pin my lace onto the strap points and the center back, and I baste it in place. So I have stitched it on and cut back the lace. I have also cut back the fabric. I think it's going well so far. Once I know the length for the strap, I will connect it underneath here, underneath the sleeve here. But now it's lunchtime. And we have a few more hours of sunlight, it seems, so for this skirt I cut out 2 rectangles with a thread pulling method again. Together they are double the lower width of the bodice. And these edges here, I cut them next to the selvage because I'd like to add a slit here. The slit will be on one side only, there'll be plenty of room for the legs anyway. And these row edges, I'll connect them onto each other with a French seam. Now I will measure the height for my slit. I just measure it on myself. You'd need to measure from your underbust, of course, since that's where the skirt starts. And I will now stitch it down right next to the selvage. And the way I like to work with these kind of slits, I stitch down to the slit opening with a regular stitch, close it here and then keep stitching down, but with a long loose stitch. This will make the next steps a bit more precise. So I will now press it open. And now I can set 2 stitches on both sides of the seam here. I use my machine's foot for orientation and I'm stitching 5 mm away from the side seam on both edges, like that. And the point where the slit opening will be, I secure it with a narrow zigzag stitch. And this will give a nice and clean finish. This is how I usually work on these kind of slits that do not have too much tension. The slit itself can be opened up. This is what it looks like on the inside. And there's one thing I clearly forgot to do. It would have been way easier to cut these fluffy ends back here just when I cut the fabric. In Russian there is a saying, "Дурная голова рукам покоя не дает." So there's that. Okay, but the skirt is connected. I will now set 2 parallel stitches all around to be able to ruffle it up. But before we merge the skirt and bodice, the bodice itself needs to be connected. So center front markings onto each other, I pin it in place. Here the lace runs beautifully down. On the other side I cut a bit too short, so I'll just fold it here. And connect it here, just close to the edge for now. I love how the overlapping creates the shape here. Okay, I have my parallel stitches here. They are long so we can pull on them better, and 2 stitches will give a bit more control for a nice even ruffle. It's going to get dark pretty soon, so let me get some tea. Okay, so the side seams of the bodice and skirt can be pinned together. Center front and center back of the bodice can be pinned onto the middle of the skirt panels, and I just pull on my stitches so that the ruching would be evenly distributed. Now I would like to quickly baste it in place. As you can see, I stitch bodice and skirt wrong sides together because I'd like to place a tunnel on top of these seam allowances. They will be hidden inside the tunnel, and thus the inside of the nightgown will be neat and clean. So for the tunnel I cut out a simple strip on the grain line that is the exact lower width of my bodice, and I added 1 cm seam allowance to both edges that I have just folded under and stitched down. The width of the tunnel is determined on the pattern. It's 1 cm and 1 cm on each side to fold under, so 3 cm in total. So I can now place this strip onto the seam allowances of the bodice and skirt here. The edge can be pinned onto the center front marking, and the middle of the strip I can pin it onto the center back marking. And the other edge right next to the other edge at center front. Hopefully you can see I pinned them wrong sides together. Now I will quickly baste it in place. Make sure to double check the tension, that everything lies in the right direction, and it can be all just stitched together with 1 cm seam allowance. Okay, that was quick. Everything is successfully connected. All the basting stitches and ruffling stitches, they are no longer needed, so we can take them out. I will now press it all upwards. Don't worry too much about creases on the skirt, we can steam those out later. The important thing is that the seam is open. And now, because this strip is 3 cm wide, we can fold it exactly over this edge here to get a 1 cm wide tunnel. Cotton folds very easily, you could even just press it with your fingers. And I also baste it in place so that it lies upward over onto the bodice. Again, it takes more time, but will make it very even and it will look lovely on the inside too. We can now stitch very close to this edge here. Okay, for the gathering I will be using an elastic. I measured on the body what the right length would be for it to be still stretched but not uncomfortably tight. I mark it on the elastic and cut it a bit generously. And I just pull it through the tunnel with a safety pin. Again, the good thing about open tunnels like that is that the elastic can be adjusted or easily replaced if it should stretch out too much with time. The markings on the elastic can be now placed onto each other, and I stitch them together with a narrow zigzag stitch. Double check that you haven't twisted them accidentally before connecting though. And that's basically it. If you want to, you can add a bow for decoration by securing it with a few hand stitches to the inside of the tunnel. So the reason I made this skirt rather narrow in comparison is because I'd like to add a scalloped lace edge. I obviously don't have a huge amount of lace, but I also think it looks better when it's not hidden in a super voluminous skirt. So it will end with the slit here. I'm trying to find a good spot. By the way, you can also fold it up here and go up the slit if you want to. I personally don't like the way it looks, so I will just stick with adding it to the bottom only. And I think the best way for the scalloping to end at the slit is where it goes up again, so that it's a bit more narrow at that point. I will use these tiny flowers for orientation since my hemline is straight and the lace will extend the length. I pin those right to the edge of the skirt, all across right down to the other edge. And if you want to do that too, I recommend to choose a skirt width that works with the pattern repeat of your lace so that the scalloping is continuous. Now I will baste it in place. It's going to be a simple scalloped edge, so no extra applique areas like on the slip dress, for example. It still took a while to trace all the flowers and leaves on the machine. And as usual, I cut back the lace and I cut back the fabric, and I'm pretty happy. These ends here I will simply fold under and add a narrow zigzag stitch here 5 mm away from the edge. I just cut it back close to that stitch, and as long as it catches all of the net, it will be fine. I do it on the other side too, of course, and I'm really happy with how this scalloping continues here. The next day I was able to sneakily measure the length for the straps, and I secured them underneath the leaves here with a narrow zigzag stitch. And it was quite intense, but I made it right on time, so I guess I can put it into the last day birthday gift category. But before I wrap it all up, I'd like to show you what it looks like on the body. Keep in mind that this one is not made for my measurements exactly. I think the scalloped edge makes it really elegant. I think this one is my favorite actually. But well, 3 nightgowns later, let me know which one you like and which one you hate. I hope this inspires you to try it out though. I make these garments and these videos just by myself in my living room, so your support is extremely motivational and very, very much appreciated. Thank you for that. And on Patreon you have voted for me to make a dress with a pleated skirt next. Bye!